When I was 12 and my brother 14, we didn't have the best home life. My dad had left before I was born, and mom was in and out of relationships. She was what most would call a functioning alcoholic. When she did work, it was whatever job she could get at whatever hours they would give her. My brother and I practically raised ourselves. Men would come and go from our lives. One stuck around longer than the rest, and for a while he even moved in with us. We'll call him Dave. Dave was a dick. He didn't hurt me or my brother, but you could tell he didn't want us there. We would fight all the time. It was like having another teenager in the house. He didn't work. He always had some big new deal that would blow up at any minute, but it never went anywhere. Dave was mooching off our mom, and it was obvious to everyone but her. Mom would go to work and Dave would start getting on us to do this or that when he was the adult in the house. He'd make my brother and I cook his food and clean his laundry. When we refused, he would threaten to kick us out like he had any say in the matter. He hated it when we told him he wasn't our dad, and he'd storm off, leaving us home alone for hours until mom came back. One day, my brother and I finally had enough. We scraped together $40, thinking that would get us somewhere, and we left while Dave was gone. We didn't have a plan on where we'd go, but anywhere was better than there. We thought about going to a friend's house, but their parents would send us right back. We needed to get some real distance between us and Dave. We walked for what felt like hours, with a vague idea we were heading west. Maybe California or something like that. We didn't know. We even stopped by the Greyhound station, but a bus ticket further than the next town was more than we had. Plus, they wouldn't sell tickets to two kids. We made it halfway across town to a gas station before our feet hurt too much to keep going. We didn't really exercise much as kids, and this was the most walking we had done in our lives. That's when my brother had the great idea of trying to hitchhike. To my undeveloped 12-year-old brain, this sounded like a great idea. We made our way a few blocks over to the main arterial that runs through town. Then, just like in the old movies we had seen, we stuck our thumbs out and started hitching for a ride. You'd have thought no one would stop for two kids on the side of the road, but after an hour, we landed our first car. It was an older woman. She was initially concerned, but my brother made up some story about our grandma being sick and needing help. The old lady bought it and took us almost to the edge of town. She was going to drop us off at what would have been our grandmother's house, but my brother came up with another story about having to pick up some things at the store. So she dropped us off at the grocer's instead. We got 2 more rides after that, and many hours later, ended up at the next town over. It was getting late now, but we had nowhere to sleep, so we figured we'd keep on pressing our luck and try for another ride. Around midnight, someone new stopped to pick us up. I knew as soon as the car door opened and the light hit the man that this wasn't going to be a pleasant experience. When you think creeper, I bet this guy's face automatically comes to mind. He had a neck beard, greasy hair and slightly bald, with pimples all over his face. I pulled on my brother's sleeve trying to keep him from getting in the car, but he brushed me off and got in anyways. I was stuck. There was no way I was letting my brother get in a car alone with this guy, so I jumped in too. There we were, in the back seat, which was half full of trash. Empty soda bottles, crumpled fast food wrappers, and what I hope was gum stuck to the seats. I'm glad my shots were up to date because I would have caught something just sitting in that car. He asked us where we were going, and my brother spun another story. The guy started driving, but after a while the houses got further apart. Traffic thinned out, and we were in the middle of nowhere. It didn't feel right. We didn't know which way the next town was, but this wasn't the interstate that would take us there. We knew that much at least. Trees were all around us, and the shadows cast by the headlights were deep and black. After about half an hour of driving down a deserted road with nothing in sight, my brother finally asked him where he was taking us. When the man didn't answer, my brother tried to open the car door. Not sure what his plan was in doing that. If he thought he could jump out of the car doing 40 on back roads, or if he was just testing to see if we were locked in. That's when the man finally spoke. He said he knew my brother's story was bullshit. Who lets their kids hitchhike to another town to see their grandma? The man took a few more turns down some dirt roads and came to a pull-off. He stopped the car and then turned around to look us in the eye. He said he knew we had money. We had to have some to make it this far. Then he said he would drive us back to town if we gave it to him. Otherwise, it's a long walk back. My brother lied again and said we didn't have anything on us. He tried to convince the man if we had cash, we wouldn't be walking. You could tell the man was getting upset, and he could read my brother like an open book. They argued for a little bit longer until the man reached under his seat and pulled out the biggest knife I had ever seen. I can still remember the way it glinted in the darkness as it caught some of the lights in the car. Even thinking about that cold steel still gives me shivers. I don't know if he was bluffing or if he was serious, but he said he could take care of both of us and leave our bodies where no one would find us. My brother broke. He threw the $40 at the man and was pulling on the door handle so hard it almost snapped. On one of his attempts, the man unlocked the door. My brother went spilling out into the dirt, and I jumped out following him. The man rolled down his window, laughed, and said, "So long, suckers," as he peeled out of the pull-off and sped down the road. We found a small grove of trees and slept there that night. The next day, we were hungry, thirsty, and just wanted to get back home. We walked those dirt roads for a whole day before making it back to the city. We got some free water from a McDonald's and drank about 5 cups. Then spent one more night in the city trying to figure out what to do to get home. Finally, my brother figured we should go to the police. It took us a while before we found a cop on the road. We had no clue where the police station was in that town. My brother went up to him and told him everything. How we had run away, hitchhiked from the town over, and we were robbed. The cop didn't care about the robbery. He couldn't even be bothered to write anything down. I think he thought it served us right. But he did arrange to get us taken home. He lectured us for probably an hour on how what we did was stupid and dangerous. We listened to him with our heads bowed until another unit came and got us. When we got home, Dave was there to greet us. Mom was still at work. Dave tore into us, but we didn't care. We got some food and slept in our beds for a solid 12 hours. Come to think of it, I don't know if Mom even realized we were gone. She never said anything about it. Dave, on the other hand, held it over our heads until him and Mom broke up and he moved out, which was about a year later. Looking back on the whole thing, I realized how stupid we were. It was only luck that kept us from getting really hurt. The man with the knife was scary, but in another way, the way those lies rolled off my brother's lips so easily bothers me, and it could have cost us our lives. This happened back in 1967. It was the summer of love. Hippies had flowers in their hair, protests were in full effect, and peace looked like it would win. My friend Beth and I wanted to be a part of it all and welcome in the age of Aquarius with other like-minded youths. The only problem was we were stuck in Oklahoma, far away from New York or San Francisco. Neither of us had money to make a long trip, but with love in our hearts, we knew the kindness of strangers would get us to where we wanted to go. We packed our stuff, mostly beads and tie-dyed shirts, and started thumbing for a ride. We met some nice people along the way. A couple from Colorado picked us up first on their way back from Arkansas, where they were spending time with family. They even let us stay with them for a week while we made plans to carry on to San Francisco. The next leg of our trip had us going all over Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. We went wherever the rides took us, and didn't care how long it was to get to our destination. In Nevada, we picked up one more girl for our trip. Her name was Heather. She was younger, only 18, but just as free-spirited as we were. We made our way to Las Vegas and had a swinging time. A couple of gentlemen took us around town and we went to party after party, expanding our minds and horizons. After a month of that, we were burnt out and ready to get the trip over with. The next ride took us to Barstow. We had a little trouble with that one. Nothing major, but Heather got into it with the driver after he tried to feel her up when we were all asleep in the car. It was the first sign that not everyone was on board with peace, and not everyone respected feminism. It took us 2 days to get to Bakersfield. The rides were slowing down, and people were passing us by more often than picking us up. From there on, we were only hopping from town to town. No one gave long rides anymore. We were in Oakdale when we got picked up, and the story takes a darker turn. It was a guy in a VW van. There were psychedelic rainbows painted all over the side, and it looked far out. We should have known by the way he was laughing at every word we said that something was wrong, but we tried to accept people for who they were. Drug culture was a part of the hippie movement, but it wasn't something any of us girls did all the time. So when this guy pulled out a joint and started smoking it while driving, Beth wanted to get out right then. The guy did put out the joint after a while because he didn't want any bad vibes to permeate the ride. But we were all kind of on edge after that. He had said when he picked us up that he would take us all the way to San Francisco. But 30 minutes after being on the road, he turned off the highway. He explained he knew a shortcut. We didn't know any better, so we went along with it. Then he started asking us very personal questions. Do we have boyfriends? Where were we going to stay? What kind of action do we like? We didn't understand the last question, so I asked him what he meant. I'm not going to repeat what he said, but it was very sexual. We all started to get uneasy after that. He then asked what we were going to do since he was nice enough to give us a ride. I guess Beth's answer of being appreciative wasn't what he wanted to hear. He said no one rides for free. It's ass, gas, or grass. Us three girls looked at each other for a long while, not sure how to respond. The guy then broke out laughing like he had told the funniest joke ever. He said we should see the look on our faces. We girls let out a nervous laugh, hoping it was just a sick joke. He then rolled up his window and lit the joint again. By this time, we noticed the city and highway had faded behind us. We were on a long stretch of road with nothing but fields around. Now, we didn't know the way to San Francisco, but we knew it wasn't out in the country. Beth asked if he could put out the joint. She didn't feel safe driving with someone who was high. The guy told her to shut up. It's his ride and his rules. We all could feel the change in the atmosphere now. The vibrations had shifted from pleasant to nasty. There were still a few cars passing us, so we weren't completely isolated, but we might as well have been. We were stuck in this car with a man getting high and no way out. The smoke became thick and oppressive. Beth and Heather were coughing and trying to roll down a window, but there were no handles in the back. Beth spoke up again, asking if he could air the car out. That's when the man turned around and looked at Beth, completely taking his eyes off the road. He told her if she didn't like drugs, she shouldn't have gotten in a car with a guy who has a head full of acid. I still remember the look on his face, the smile that curled up at the corners of his mouth. In that instant, he looked like the devil. The car jumped forward with a lurch. He started to speed up. Even from the back, we could see his knuckles turn white and his jaw clenching. There was an audible pop and grinding of teeth. He kept asking us, what's it gonna be? Ass, gas, or grass? We didn't answer. We were too scared to say anything. After a bit of that, he slowed down, slicked back his hair, and let out another chuckle. To no one in particular, he asked, "That was crazy, right?" Heather, in almost a whisper, said she wanted to get out. I don't think the man heard her, because he kept driving. Then Heather said it a little louder. The man turned up the music this time. Finally, Heather was screaming and freaking out in the back seat, yelling she wanted to get out. The man slammed on the brakes, sending us all forward. I hit my face on the back of a seat and broke my nose. He turned again to us and motioned to the door. In a calm voice, he told us to get out then. We grabbed whatever we could and hopped out. Before I was able to get the one bag I left because I couldn't carry it, he sped off with the side door still open. We sat on the side of the road for a long time before someone stopped to pick us up. We made it to San Francisco the next day. Heather split from us about a month later. Beth and I stayed together and in the hippie scene until the 70s. Then we both got married and started a family. Life goes on, but I still remember that trip, and especially that guy. It taught me you can trust a person, but you can never trust drugs. This happened 3 days ago, and I'm still not sure what to do about it. I don't pick up hitchhikers. I know everyone says that, but I really don't. I've driven past dozens over the years without a second thought. But last Tuesday, I was heading home from work on Route 9, and I saw this guy on the shoulder with his thumb out. Something made me slow down, not sympathy or anything noble like that. It was more that he looked familiar somehow, like maybe I'd seen him around town or we'd crossed paths somewhere. I couldn't place it, but that nagging feeling made me pull over before I could think better of it. He jogged up to the passenger window, and I asked where he was headed. He said he needed to get to the east edge of town near the old industrial park. I told him I could take him most of the way there, but my turnoff came before that. He thanked me, got in, and we started driving. The conversation began normal enough. Weather, traffic, and the usual small talk. Then somehow we got into movies and he mentioned he'd just seen the indie horror film that came out a few months back. I'd seen it too and loved it, which isn't common because it's barely played anywhere. We talked about the ending and he had the exact same interpretation I did, right down to which character we thought was really the villain. From there, it just kept going. He brought up this obscure podcast about unsolved mysteries that I'd been binging for weeks. Then woodworking came up, and he mentioned he was thinking about getting into model building, specifically ships in a bottle, which has been my main hobby for the past year. Every topic that came up, we aligned perfectly. Same taste in music, same frustrations with the new highway construction, same opinion about the restaurant that just opened downtown. Then food came up. He mentioned ice cream, and I joked about how I was a snob about it, that my favorite flavor is something most people haven't even tried. He asked what it was, and I told him black sesame. His face lit up, and he went on about how it was the best flavor, how he'd found this one place that makes it, and it's like nothing else. He described the texture and the subtle sweetness exactly the way I would have. That's when it started feeling off. Black sesame ice cream isn't vanilla or chocolate. Most people have never heard of it. I've met maybe 2 other people in my life who've even tried it, let alone loved it. The odds of this random hitchhiker sharing that specific preference seemed impossible. I got quiet for a bit, trying to process how strange this was. My mind was turning over the conversation, replaying all those perfect alignments, when he spoke up and told me I'd missed my turn. He just said it casually, like he was pointing out something obvious. It took me a second, but then it dawned on me. I'd never told him where my turn was. I'd only said it came before the edge of town. There were probably 15 different roads between where I picked him up and the industrial park, but he knew exactly which one was mine. I pulled into a gas station at the next exit, hands shaking a little. I put the car in park and turned to him and asked him directly who he was. How did he know where I was supposed to turn? He looked wounded, like I'd insulted him. He said he was surprised I didn't remember him. He reminded me that we'd bumped into each other at the grocery store last week. We'd been in the frozen section and I'd been looking at the ice cream. He asked me if I had any recommendations and I told him about Black Sesame, even mentioned the brand I liked. He said he'd gone back and bought some the next day. I didn't remember that conversation at all. But then again, I talk to people in passing all the time and forget about it 5 minutes later. He kept on going. He said we'd also met at the movie theater about a month ago. I'd been coming out of that indie horror film and he'd asked me if it was worth seeing. I'd apparently talked it up and that's why he went to see it. Then he mentioned we'd also run into each other a few months before that at the hardware store. I'd had model ship supplies in my cart and we talked about hobbies. As he talked, little flashes came back, vague memories of brief conversations with someone, a face in the crowd, nothing concrete, but enough to make me realize he wasn't completely making this up. We had crossed paths before, multiple times. But that's when it clicked. This guy had been following me, showing up where I go, learning my routines, my interests, and my schedule. That's why he looked familiar. That's why he knew my turn. That's how he knew everything about me. I'd been feeding him information in these little interactions, and he'd been collecting it all like puzzle pieces. I told him to get out. Said this was his stop, even though we were nowhere near where he needed to go. I expected him to argue or get defensive or angry. Instead, he smiled, this calm, pleasant smile. He thanked me for the ride, said it was great catching up, and told me he hoped we'd run into each other again soon. He made it sound inevitable, like he already had plans for the next time. Then he got out, gave me a little wave and walked toward the convenience store attached to the gas station. I watched him go inside, and I just sat there for a minute trying to figure out what to do. By the time I thought about going in there to confront him or get someone to call the police, I realized how it would sound. We'd had a series of random conversations in public places over several months, and he'd happened to remember them. He'd been friendly. He hadn't threatened me or done anything illegal. I didn't even know if the name he'd given me was real. I drove home taking different roads than usual. I've been checking my mirrors constantly. I'm looking over my shoulder in stores. I don't know what this guy wants or what he's building up to. All I know is he's out there, somewhere in my town, and he's been watching me for a long time. This happened to me about 3 years ago. I was driving through rural Oklahoma on my way to visit my brother. The highway I was on wasn't exactly desolate, but you could go 20 minutes without seeing another car. My Honda started making this grinding noise and then just died. I managed to coast it onto the shoulder before it gave up completely. I'm not a car guy. I can change a tire and check the oil, but that's about it. I popped the hood anyway and stared at the engine like that would help. There was no cell service, not even a bar. I tried walking up and down the road a bit to see if I could catch a signal, but there wasn't one. The sun was getting lower, and I realized I had two options. Wait for someone to come by and hope they'd help, or start walking the 15 miles to the next town I'd seen on a sign a while back. I decided to wait. Cars passed every now and then, but most didn't even slow down. I couldn't blame them. I probably wouldn't stop for a random guy on the side of the road either. After about an hour, this beat-up pickup truck slowed down and pulled over in front of me. An old man got out and asked what was wrong. He had to be in his 70s at least, thin as a rail, with clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. I explained my situation and he walked over to look at the engine. He asked me a few questions about what happened before it died, then shook his head. He told me if I had a carburetor he could probably fix it right there, but these newer cars with all their computers and fuel injection systems were beyond him. He said his best guess was the fuel pump, but he couldn't be sure. Then he offered me a ride into town. I hesitated for a second because the guy looked rough, but I didn't have many options. I grabbed my bag, locked the car, and climbed into his truck. The interior smelled like motor oil and cigarettes. Fast food wrappers covered the floor. He started asking questions almost immediately. Normal stuff at first. Where was I headed? Where was I from? What did I do for work? I answered politely and tried to make conversation. Then the questions got more personal. Was I married? Did I have kids? Did my parents know where I was? How often did I talk to them? Did anyone know I was on this road today? That last one struck me as odd. I told him my brother knew I was coming to visit, which was true. The old man just nodded and kept driving. He started talking about his life, how he'd lived out here his whole life, how his wife died 10 years ago and he'd been alone ever since. He mentioned he had a daughter, but they didn't talk anymore. Something about a fallout which he wouldn't elaborate on. Then he asked if we could swing by his place real quick before heading into town. He said he needed to grab something and it would only take a minute. I didn't love the idea, but I also didn't want to be rude to someone who was helping me out. So I told him sure. I asked if I could use his phone when we got there and call my brother to let him know what happened. The old man said he didn't have a phone, said they cost too much money, and besides, he didn't have anyone to call anyways. That didn't sit right with me. Even the poorest people I knew had phones these days, but I didn't push it. We turned off the main road onto a dirt path that wound through some trees. His house appeared after about half a mile. Calling it a house is generous. It was more of a shack, probably built in the 20s if I had to guess. The screen door was barely hanging on by one hinge, and the front steps were just some rotting wood balanced on cinder blocks. The whole place looked like it could collapse in a strong wind. He told me to come on in, that it would only take a minute. Again, I didn't want to be rude. I followed him inside. The smell hit me first, then the sound of flies, dozens of them buzzing around. The hallway was narrow and cluttered with trash. Newspapers, food containers, cardboard boxes stacked haphazardly. The living room wasn't much better. I stood inside the doorway, not wanting to go further in. The old man headed toward the back of the house, still talking. He asked me more questions about my family and told me more stories about his late wife. His voice got quieter as he moved deeper into the house, and then it stopped completely. I waited by the door. A minute passed, then 5. I started to feel uneasy. I called out to him and got no response. I called again, louder, still no reply. I thought maybe he'd fallen. Old people fall all the time, and this guy looked like he was barely holding on. I started walking through the house toward where I'd heard his voice last. The smell got worse with every step. The flies got thicker. Then I saw it on the floor, a dark stain, recent enough that it still looked wet in places. Drops of it led further back down the hallway. Then I heard something, a couple of dull thuds. Silence, then more thuds. I stopped and listened. I could hear him talking to himself now, muttering words I couldn't make out. More thuds. I got to a door that was slightly open. I looked through the crack. The old man was standing at a table with his back to me. He was holding some kind of tool, bringing it down hard on something on the table. That's what the thuds were. Then I saw it. Blood, dripping off the edge of the table onto the floor. I kind of was dumbstruck. The scene was surreal. I just stared for a good few minutes in disbelief. I don't know what was on the table. I didn't want to know. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any noise. Once I got to the living room, I walked out as quickly and quietly as I could. I didn't run until I was past the tree line and back on the dirt road. Then I ran until my lungs burned. I made it to the main road and started walking in the direction of town. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see his truck come after me, but it never did. After about an hour of walking, a family in an SUV picked me up and drove me the rest of the way. I called a tow truck and my brother, got a hotel room, and tried not to think about it. Maybe he was just a hunter, and that was a deer or something on the table. Could have been he makes his own sausages or something. I tried to think of it being anything else than what I think it was. There's no way it was that. The way he acted was so casual. Besides all the strange questions, there were no other red flags. Even those I can reason away. He's lonely, not a lot of social interactions, etc. Maybe he ran out to get some salt or spices and had to get the meat put away before it spoiled. That kind of makes sense in a logical way. I never reported it because I didn't see anything definitively wrong. Just blood and an old man in a shack. It was still super creepy though. This happened about 3 years ago. I was driving from Boston to Washington State to visit family for the holidays. My buddy was supposed to come with me to split the drive, but he bailed last minute with some work excuse. So there I was, staring down a cross-country trip by myself. The first couple of days were fine, just podcasts and gas station coffee. But somewhere around Montana, the loneliness really started to hit. It's just endless highway out there, barely any other cars, nothing but flat land and sky. I was coming up on the outskirts of Billings when I saw this guy on the shoulder with his thumb out. Clean-cut kid, early 20s maybe, wearing a decent jacket. Not the usual scraggly hitchhiker type. I don't know what came over me, but I pulled over. I figured the company would be nice and he looked harmless enough. He got in and told me he needed to get to Great Falls. Said his girlfriend was pregnant and his car was in the shop, so he was trying to get up there to see her. It's about a 3.5-hour drive. I told him no problem. I was heading that direction anyway. The first hour was pretty quiet. That awkward silence where you're both hyper-aware you're sitting 2 feet from a complete stranger. I tried to make small talk around the 2-hour mark, just dumb stuff about the weather and how nice it had been. He kept giving me short responses. Yeah, sure, that kind of thing. Then something shifted. He started opening up about his life. Heavy stuff right away. How he wasn't ready to be a father. How his own dad was never around. I'm doing my best to be supportive, saying things like, yeah man, that's tough. I hear you. Maybe he took that as me relating to his situation, because that's when it got really dark. He started talking about not being able to handle life anymore, about hurting himself. Then he started mentioning hurting other people. Not in a specific threatening way, just these vague concerning statements about violence and not seeing the point to life anymore. I didn't know what to do. I just kept listening and trying to sound sympathetic, because honestly I was scared to say the wrong thing. The last 90 minutes felt like forever. When we finally got to Great Falls, he had me drop him off at this apartment complex. I watched which unit he went into, waited until he was inside, then immediately called the police for a wellness check. I gave them the address and explained the situation as calmly as I could. I have no idea what happened after that. Part of me hopes he got the help he needed. The other part figures he probably denied everything when the cops showed up. I've never picked up a hitchhiker since, and I probably never will again. I still wondered if I did the right thing.
You have been watching Neon Noir, a Radeon production brought to you by Spoopy Cola.